Happy March 4th, JLD here, and welcome to MSTR today. In this show, we talk about two God candles back to back, canceling each other out. We talk about Bitcoin, not war. We also talk about the elimination of capital gains on Bitcoin is actually being considered and talked about. And then you really have two choices when it comes to Bitcoin, when it comes to strategy: long-term view or pain. What are you going to choose? I personally choose the long-term view. I'm in this for 8, 12 years minimum timeline, and that's my choice. And I have two great video clips, Michael Saylor and Tom Lee, and some other goodies that are here for you. Remember, this video is not financial advice, but please do comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know what you think about those two God candles, anything else is coming up in your world, and let's dive in. All right, yesterday's God candle was obviously a lot of fun, but the one that followed it was obviously less so. And Bitcoin Therapist rightfully points out Bitcoin finally got the $10,000 God candles. And here you go, a blip, a blip. And yeah, that happens. Well, it's a reality of the world that we live in right now. So it is what it is. Michael Saylor wanted us to know that last week's Strategy did not sell any shares of Class A common stock at the market equity offering program and did not purchase any Bitcoin. As of 3/2/25, we hodled 499,096 Bitcoin, acquired for $33 billion at 66,357 per Bitcoin. And Chris has a reminder for us: trading Bitcoin is a sign of lesser intellect. And I choose to agree with this. I'm just a holder. I'm just going to hold. I held all the way up in the last cycle from I first started buying Bitcoin when it was at 9,000. I wrote it down to 3,000. I could have sold then. I wrote it up to 69,000. I obviously could have sold then. I wrote it down to 16,000. I obviously could have sold then. And then I've written it back up to now the highs of 109,000. And I obviously could have sold then, but instead I've just been accumulating, because that's the decision that I made, and I'm sticking to it. I'm happy with it. And this is Michael Saylor's thoughts on that. The Bitcoin Therapist says, fix the money, fix the world, because Elon Musk wants us to know what the reality of world is. And I can tell you, having been an officer in the U.S. Army, I really resonate with this. I spent 13 months in Iraq as a tank commander, and man, this is a sad reminder and a sad scene. While the king and the queen sit at the table having some wine, this is the reality of the battlefield. And then, of course, I wanted to show this because Michael Saylor posted, buy Bitcoin, not bombs. And I can tell you, I agree with this as well. Adam Livingston wants us to know that if Trump eliminates capital gains on Bitcoin, Strategy instantly goes from being a corporate anomaly to the blueprint for the 21st century Treasury strategy, front-running an entire economic paradigm shift. While other companies were busy stockpiling, devaluing dollars, MSTR was hoarding the only asset that just became tax optimized, regulatory endorsed, and mathematically inevitable, a cheat code in plain sight. The market hasn't priced this in yet. MSTR is poised to explode if this happens. And this is on the report from Simply Bitcoin of rumor, Trump to eliminate Bitcoin capital gains tax on Friday's White House crypto summit. I'll put a word of caution in here. We've seen a lot of rumors that have definitely not come to fruition or just turned out to be very vague, future-flung statements. So proceed cautiously. Now, Adam wants us to know that if we are fixated on MSTR's short-term fiat price, we're missing the entire point. Right now, the market still prices it in USD, but as Bitcoin becomes the unit of account, Strategy will be valued by its proportional claim on Bitcoin itself, not some arbitrary dollar number. Flat fiat price volatility is just noise on the path to an inevitable realignment. At the end of this transition, no one will ask, what's MSTR in dollars? Because dollars will be irrelevant. The only thing that will matter is how much Bitcoin per share represents. And as fiat debasement accelerates, that ratio becomes the only metric that matters. People waiting for a dip in USD terms are measuring in a broken system that won't exist at the end game. And now we're moving on to both Tom Lee and Michael Saylor dropping some truth bombs. So, gentlemen, Take it away.
What did you attribute the move down below 80 to? Just that it's Bitcoin? What do you want?
Yes. I would say what's interesting is Bitcoin's not had negative headlines in February, but it was down. But I know our technician, Mark Newton, had talked about this being a cyclical downturn in Bitcoin through the end of March. So he was talking mid-January, getting down to 62. The weekend...
105 to 62. That's just Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's a typical...
Do the math, though. It's like, in a month, 105 to 62.
Yeah, that's a test of the resolve
that
of
hurts
bulls, right?
people that buy at 105.
Yeah, but as you know, Bitcoin makes all of its gains in 10 days. So if people sort of try to time this, they're going to miss out on a chance for Bitcoin to go back to its highs.
And by the end, at some point in this year, you think it gets, because last year you thought it might get to 150 or even higher, right?
Yeah. I think it's going to do better than 150 this year because it's becoming more widely held.
Yeah.
If Citadel starts trading it, it starts to have more broad acceptance.
Okay. Tom Lee, thanks.
Are you involved in advising around this strategic crypto reserve?
I've met with a bunch of senators on the Democratic and the Republican side, a bunch of Congress people, a few members of cabinet, a few members of the administration, and anybody that wants to talk. You know me, for the last 4.5 years, I'm willing to talk about Bitcoin to anybody, anywhere in the world, every day.
Yes, and we appreciate that, talking to our audience about it. So were you surprised that in the announcement over the weekend, the president mentioned other smaller coins like XRP, Solana, and Cardano, as well as Bitcoin for the strategic crypto fund?
I'm not surprised. I mean, I think there's no way to interpret this other than this is bullish for Bitcoin and is bullish for the entire U.S. crypto industry. There are conservatives that view the right path forward is just a Bitcoin-only policy because Bitcoin is a commodity, an asset without an issuer, a neutral asset, and there's no controversy. But the president's adopted a more liberal economic policy, and that's his right. He's president of the United States.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you would have preferred it, though, if it was a Bitcoin-only fund.
I believe that the best thing for the country is to move forward with an enlightened, progressive policy toward digital assets. I think it's worth $100 trillion to the United States. And ultimately, there's 4 different assets that people need to come to grips with. A digital commodity like Bitcoin, an asset without an issuer backed by digital power. A digital currency like a stable coin backed by a fiat currency equivalent. A digital security, an asset with an issuer backed by a stock or a bond so we can tokenize Wall Street. And then a digital token, which is an asset with an issuer that's backed by digital utility. I think everybody's trying to come to grips with that taxonomy. And as the market gets more educated, we're going to see more progressive, constructive policy engagement.
But as it relates to the crypto fund, I guess, one thing people are going to try to figure out, and what the White House is going to have to explain, is why we need that. I get that you think the price of Bitcoin is going up sharply, and you've definitely put your money where your mouth is, but it is still a speculative asset. So is it just about investment gains for the U.S. government, or is there another strategic reason, say like oil, we have that, where we would need this?
The key to keep in mind is that Bitcoin is not competing with the dollar. It's competing with international real estate, global equities, expensive money managers on Wall Street, and any long-range investment that somebody makes. And so right now we're about $2 trillion in Bitcoin. It's going to 20 trillion, then it's going to 200 trillion, then it's growing 20% a year. And that capital is coming from overseas. It's coming from China, from Russia, from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from the 20th century to the 21st century. So what's compelling about it is if the United States takes a position in the emerging crypto economy, if it buys up 10, 20% of the Bitcoin network, we're going to pay off the national debt. And so why wouldn't that be in the interest of the United States?
I guess the question would be, we're dealing with instruments that historically, Michael, have had drawdowns of, you name it, I mean, 20, 40, 50%. How much risk what would that do to sentiment if, in fact, that was a paper loss, even momentarily, for the government?
I don't think anybody's ever lost money in the Bitcoin network holding 4 years. The United States' best investments are Alaska, Mexico, California, and Louisiana. And Manhattan. We're still holding them hundreds of years later. It's a nation state. So presumably, you want to buy Bitcoin, you want to hold it for 100 years. You know where the future's going. The AIs, the foreigners, the Europeans, the 20th century capitalists, they're all going to cyberspace. And so the United States has the ability to buy this for a nickel and pay off the national debt. It'll be the greatest economic program of the 21st century for this country.
How do you think it gets funded?
I mean, I think that I'd leave that to the president's working group. They'll eventually decide what they want to do and the scale they want to do it. There are a dozen people on it, the head of the Treasury, the SEC, the CFTC, Commerce, the Attorney General. The president, I'm sure, will opine. Yeah. I'm sure you'll have leadership from Tim Scott and French Hill, both the Republicans and the Democrats. Everybody's going to have their opinions. It's above my pay grade to decide. But what I would say is this. We bought Manhattan for 60 guilders. It was a good trade. We bought Alaska for $6 million. It was a good trade. We paid $40 million for 75% of this country. It's a good trade. We can afford it. We should buy the future.
I mean, and you've done this before, you've talked about this before, but comparing a cryptocurrency digital asset that is still considered highly speculative to American cities and states.
Well, Bitcoin's not highly speculative to the 500 million people in the crypto economy. It's the best performing asset in the past 15 years and generally the best performing asset every single year. My company's gone from a $250 million investment to almost a $50 billion position in 48 months. So clearly, there's enormous economic energy in this asset. It is probably the most certain thing in the financial universe if you have a long time horizon.
I have another sort of, and this might be like a legal question, but as this becomes more adopted, and if we're talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve or crypto reserve, how do you prevent insider trading, front running? You know, there's no insider trading laws because they're not securities. So Trump can just, tweet about X coin and someone can front run it.
The reason that there's so much support for a commodity like Bitcoin is it is an asset without an issuer. No entity controls it. No entity runs the network. No entity can change the protocol. No entity has enough power to impact the market trading of that protocol. That's actually why most of the focus is on the digital commodity. And that's what makes Bitcoin special. Satoshi was the insider. He left 1 million Bitcoin for all of humanity forever and walked away without ever benefiting. And that's what makes Bitcoin special.
Do you think that any other asset should be in the strategic crypto reserve?
I think if you're looking out over the next 100 years, trying to figure out how do you capitalize a nation state or a country, what you want is a digital commodity. But if you have a sovereign wealth fund, then I think it's well within the rights of the leader of the nation to decide to put, proprietary assets, securities, tokens, and the like into it. And of course, the decision will eventually be made through a fairly comprehensive political process over the next 6 months. We have till July 22nd when the digital assets framework and recommendations from the executive order are due on the president's desk. It should be interesting to watch what happens between now and then.
And there you have it, another episode of MSTR today. I truly hope you enjoyed. And if you are getting value out of these videos, please just take a second, hit that like button, give me a comment about where you're watching from. It's very, very much appreciated. Today is Tuesday, so it's Tracker Tuesday. Here we are at strategy.com/charts. We're on the chart section. You can see the return of MSTR against the Magnificent Seven and some other interesting ones. This is since the BSE. And then, of course, we can go to the 1 year. We can see where we're at there and so on and so forth. So just a good chart to kind of check up on what's going on and the kind of zoom out longer term horizon, not the short term pain that a lot of us, of course, have been experiencing day to day. And just remember, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So curate those people and remember what Michael Saylor says, there is no second best.
What's the second best? There is no second best.